All right, welcome back to Swedenborg Life. Today we're going to be looking at what the divine is focusing on in our lives. We're going to cover these topics, which are the focus of divine providence, as I said, temporal versus eternal matters, and how to unite the eternal to our daily life. Usually, I've found that it doesn't seem like anybody's in control of anything in my life. But Swedenborg and many others assert that there is a divine providence or a guidance that's at work for each of us. It's a plan that's leading us along to something good. But if that force is there, where is it? So a tree branch fell and it messed up the gutter on my house. Wouldn't a better plan have been for it to miss? I mean, it could have just hit the ground, no harm done. I think many would agree that if there's a plan to life, it's cryptic. But does part of the difficulty in recognizing the plan come from confusion about the goals of the plan itself? What is God really focusing on? Swedenborg wrote that even to have some grasp of understanding what's going on, we have to get the difference between what's temporary and what's eternal. So stay tuned. All right, to the live audience, thank you. We were a few minutes late, and we really appreciate you sticking around. Welcome. I'm really happy to be back doing this jam every Monday night. My name is Curtis. I'm with the Swedenborg Foundation, nonprofit group that just looks to get conversation around the ideas in Swedenborg and similar ideas. And so we hope you're enjoying the programming today. My guests are Ray Silverman and Peter Rhodes. Always excited to have these guys on the show. Ray is the author of Rise Above It, and Peter is the author of Observing Spirit. And so today we have a lot of good things to talk about, including how do you pronounce temporal. I was thinking it was temporal, but now that I'm saying it more and more, that sounds really archaic. So we're going to go with temporal, and we're going to kind of get into some of this. But before we do, remember, this is a live show so that you guys can have input and impact the conversation with your own mind, your own views, and all that. So please ask questions, leave comments, do all that. And how that works is you're on YouTube, just write them on the YouTube comments, or if you're on Facebook, write them there. We'll find them in the second half of the show. We'll pull them up. So don't forget that. All right, let's get into our first discussion segment. Part one, the focus of divine providence. And so Pete and Ray, I wanted to lead into this one by reading a little Swedenborg quote and then kind of get your thoughts and feelings and objections to it. So let's take a look at that quote. It has not yet been realized that divine providence, and Swedenborg says divine providence to mean God's guidance of life, focuses on our eternal state at every step of our journey. It cannot focus on anything else because divinity is infinite and eternal, and what is infinite or eternal or divine is not in time. It therefore sees the whole future as present. Since this is the nature of divinity, it follows that there is something eternal in everything it does, overall and in detail. So there you have, he's saying that the focus of the plan is on what's eternal. So Pete, what does that mean to you when you hear him say that?
Well, I guess I translate it into what's important.
Okay.
I think about my children growing up. My daughters were swimmers and dancing, and my sons wrestled and so forth. So you could focus on, their wrestling. You could focus on their record. You could focus on their dancing or swimming. And that comes and goes. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. But you're really not focused on that as the most important thing in that relationship. You really focus on their experience and their love and your love for them and your hope that they're happy. And those things are eternal. Their happiness, you don't say, well, I want you to win this match, but this match comes and this match goes. You don't say, well, I want you to be happy this minute, next minute. Doesn't really matter that much to me. So I think God is love itself, and ultimately the focus of God is His love, His loving, and making us capable of loving too. And that isn't in time and space, and that's not only His focus. I believe that's the most important thing to all of us, really.
Yeah, that's a great example with a wrestling match or something, right? You win or lose, but that cheesy saying. It's not if you win or lose; it's how you play the game, right? But that's sort of what we're saying here. That the attitude, the character you're cultivating through that, is a spiritual thing. As Swedenborg is saying, that our character, our consciousness, our mind and heart, that's our spirit, and so that's something that stays. Whereas records, those kind of things, move on. So that's what we're focusing on in a proxy. God is doing the same thing. So Ray, do you have any? Does that spark anything for you?
It did. It brought to mind the words of Jesus. You know, we say Swedenborg says, but often Swedenborg is just unfolding what Jesus said.
Yep. Yeah.
So Jesus said, lay not up for yourselves treasures on earth. And he compared treasures on earth with treasures in heaven. And so a treasure on earth, you know, he spoke about things that rust.
Right.
And things that moth corrupts. You know, so our car is going to eventually rot
Sooner
out,
rather than later.
and our clothing is going to, you know, the moths, or somehow everything will disintegrate. So Jesus is talking about the temporal, but then he says, lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, those things that we have loved, those people that we have loved. That love can never die,
Mm-hmm.
and that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, and sometimes you'll hear of earth talked about when it mentions in scripture, heaven and earth. The earth is sort of the outer part of the mind, or what people would now call sort of ego, or external, superficial parts. But yet heaven are these sort of more internal, more altruistic, deeper kind of joys, right? So in a way, we're laying up treasures in a certain part of our mind. What do you think about that, Pete?
Well, I was thinking in terms of, you had mentioned the word character in terms
Right.
of wrestling. So I had a good coach, and he wanted you to wrestle well. But sometimes I would win, but he wasn't really happy with the way I won. I didn't show the sportsmanship, I didn't show the character. Other times the guy was better than me. And the way I handled that loss, he respected that. So he wasn't unaware of the temporary, but his focus was on those kind of values that you're trying to build in something, which is much more important and much more interior than just their external event, external winning or losing.
Yeah, definitely. So if God is the coach, to go back to the metaphor or the example in the beginning, a tree branch hits my house or something. Like, to win or lose the wrestling, when you're in it, that's all you're thinking about. Like, oh, I lost, this is horrible. Oh, I won, this is great. If this tree hit my house, that's horrible. Oh, it didn't, that's great. But if the coach is more looking at what's important here is developing sportsmanship. We're developing these internal, so that part of the providence in life is focusing on those things. And so things that don't make any sense if you're just thinking of if God is love, I want money, so God should make me happy through giving me money, right? But if there's this, actually money doesn't stay, and if it's given to you in the wrong way, it can actually be an impediment to the spirit. So that leads us right into our next topic. So let's take a look at that, and we can continue our conversation. Part 2, temporal versus eternal matters. And I'm just really wiring my brain to say temporal instead of temporal, like tempura, shrimp tempura. Okay, so let's take a look at it. It's just a short quote with this one. There are a great many temporal matters, but they all boil down to eminence and wealth. By temporal matters, I mean things that either die off in time or simply cease when our life on earth is over. By eternal matters, I mean things that do not die off and stop either in time or at the end of our life on earth. And so Swedenborg kind of frames all of life that really, because life is so short, and the physical life is so short, and the spiritual life is what goes on and endures, that's really what matters. And so obviously somebody who's wise and loving as God is going to be focusing on what really matters. This is kind of like your parents are like, oh, you can't watch TV right now because you got to study, because they know you got a whole career ahead of you, that kind of thing, right? So is that part of how God is operating in our life?
Yeah, I think a short life is very short. Even if it's 90 years, that's really short compared to eternity.
Yeah.
And if you're developing character, you're developing the ability to love others outside of yourself, to serve others with enjoyment, and having that service be what your life is about. We believe, at least in the Swedenborg, that when the body dies, those things continue. Yeah. They're already in you. They're already there. But that's what you're developing. I recently went on my roof, and there's a place that was rotting. My immediate reaction was fear. And then letting go of that fear, just trust that God will take care of this. He'll do a lot of it through you and through a roofing company. I realized that I could enjoy the process of calling someone, getting them to look at the roof, finding out about different roofs. Living could still be enjoyable. If I focused on the roof as a problem that I had to solve, it wasn't enjoyable at all. if I let go of that concern and trusted God and got into the relationships around that process, I found, and so far it's been pretty enjoyable, you know.
Yeah, that resonates for me because it's a lot in approach. I find with things that seem like burdens or like disasters of some kind or calamities that if I shift the way I'm thinking about them, and you know, Ray, you had been mentioning scripture, and I think about it in the story of the guy who built his house on a rock or built his house on sand, and I find that for the house of my mind, if I'm trying to build it on how well are things going in my external life, that's very shifty ground, because all of a sudden, something can leak, the sump can get plugged in the basement and everything floods. And so it's not something that I can really do much about, or all of a sudden I have expenses come up if my bank account gets smaller. So, but if I'm thinking about, so some things in life are contributing, some are taking away in that sense. But if I'm looking at, okay, how am I developing into a person who has a kind of attitude that can deal with this stuff and perform as well as I can, like under these circumstances, and not get upset and do what you're doing up on the roof, then it's like, okay, every situation can contribute to something, rather than some contribute and some detract. Does that make sense, Ray?
Yeah. There's another story also from the Gospels where this fellow is storing everything in his barns, and he just can't store enough, so he builds bigger barns to store those. And Jesus comes to him and says, when he stores everything in his bigger barns, he says, now I can take my ease. Mm-hmm. And so we have this feeling of, okay, now I've got a new roof, I got the lawn mowed, I got everything taken care of. Now I can feel peaceful. And I learned this from Pete, actually, that kind of peace is just a temporary relief from worldly concerns. But the grass is going to grow, and the roof's going to get old, and things are constantly going to be shifting, like you say, these shifting sands. Mm-hmm. And Jesus says to this fellow, take heed and beware of covetousness. And he's just reminding him, to stop being so greedy. And we tend to be just wanting everything to work out the way we want it to work out. It's a kind of avarice or greediness, and just accepting present circumstances and say, this is interesting. Yeah,
which is a theme that appears across a lot of faith traditions of all kinds. I remember, Pete, you once saying in a DVD that you guys had produced, God has set up the world to oppose our ego. Because and you would think that's God is, the life is doing all these things that don't make me happy, therefore there is no God, or God is evil, or something like that. But in a way, having our ego opposed is a gift to us, right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, my ego really wants the world to center on it, and it wants happiness all the time, and it wants pleasure all the time, and it wants to avoid pain. Those things are impossible. Divine impossibility to satisfy the human ego. So those demands put me in fear and anxiety and wanting and disappointment, and all those things God wants to free me from. So he wants to free me from my own desire and own want, so I can enjoy what God gives me, which is the present moment as it is. Sometimes with a roof that's working, sometimes with a roof that isn't. You can be at peace no matter what the circumstances are, and that can last forever. So there's a thing someone wrote for me that says it's not peace from the storm, but it's peace amidst the storm.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of peace that God and Jesus was talking about, is there can be a state where you're happy, and what the weather is and what your financial situation is not going to impact on that, because that kind of peace is beyond understanding, beyond your ego's type of understanding. It's something more internal and permanent.
I think sometimes I feel like that's why people like so much the idea of like a cozy cabin in winter. Mm-hmm. That it's so nice. There's like a fire inside, and the colder and the snowier it is outside, the better. Because I feel like that's an image of, this sort of deeper sort of spiritual, some kind of state or environment there, that no matter what's going on in life, there's this warmth there. And I think that's why that's so cool.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
That's
well,
really
and
nice.
this all has to do with our next topic. So let's get into our third part 3. How to unite the eternal to our daily life. So what I'm hoping we've communicated over the first 2 segments is that the reason that life doesn't go exactly the way we want it to is that God is looking at God. There is a presence of God in there, but the focus of God are these spiritual traits, meaning character traits, because as Swedenborg says, you take your life with you. When the physical life ends, who you are doesn't go away. All your character stuff stays. So God is looking at that and making executive decisions based on that, which doesn't always lead to. But so this is a bunch of theory. But if he's thinking about that, we're thinking about what we need. So where do we intersect? How can there be any kind of partnership here? So I think this next quote speaks to that. This is from Divine Providence. We are essentially time-bound, and the Lord is essentially eternal. Therefore, nothing comes from us that is not time-bound, and nothing comes from the Lord that is not eternal. Through his divine providence, the Lord unites himself to what is physical through what is spiritual, and to what is time-bound through what is eternal, doing so to acts of service. Earthly things and situations are spiritual and eternal if we focus on the good we can do with them and look for a deeper comfort and pleasure in that good. In that case, even the outer comfort and pleasure is spiritual, and the time-bound is eternal. So it seems to me like, Pete, that he's saying here, it does to connect with something eternal. We don't have to be somewhere cosmic, or it can be in little things in life. It's just sort of our attitude towards them, right?
Well, it said anything that comes from us is time-bound.
Mm-hmm.
So my thoughts are based on me, which is finite, and based on time and space. If I can get to a state where I'm trusting that God is the doer, and I let go of my thinking mind as the doer, which is time-bound, and get that space where I'm not thinking, I'm actually one with what I'm doing, which is service, then if you're not thinking, there's no time in my experience. When I really stop thinking about the future, about the past, if I'm not thinking, there doesn't appear to be any time. There just is being right now. Thich Nhat Hanh, who just, I think, had a stroke, he said, the present moment, the only moment.
Yeah.
You are home, you have arrived. The natural, which is time-bound, is always thinking of arrival. God is in the present moment, which is the eternal present moment. So letting go of myself and my concerns about those temporal things puts me in the state where God is always in the infinite. God is always present, and God is in time and out of, and time outside of time. So let go of my thinking about myself and stay in the present moment. And that's not easy. I say that like that's easy. It's not easy for me.
Yeah.
I have to give up a lot of thinking to stop thinking.
Yes.
But when I'm capable of not looking to thinking to make me happy, but look to the present moment that is happiness itself, then I start to get broken away from those concerns that are time and space and personal.
Yeah, we can definitely lose track of time.
Yeah.
Not that this show is so great, but this often goes fast for me.
Mm.
And we're probably over time already. But I did. So, when you're doing something fun, yeah, you do connect. And Ray, do you have any thoughts on the connection of the eternal and the immediate?
Well, I don't think.
Wow, you just got enlightened in front of us, man.
But I do notice thoughts coming into my mind, and I can share what comes in.
Mm-hmm.
And what came in is the idea of a very time-bound thing. It's a machine. It's an ambulance. Very beautiful Cadillac ambulance, great motor, runs really, really well. And the driver loves to help people. It's just the love that he has. So he loves his ambulance. He takes really good care of it, keeps it in top shape, because it's a tool for him.
Mm.
Just like his body and mind are tools for the Lord. So the Lord's driving the ambulance,
Right.
and he's cooperating with that. And so in that way, what's time-bound, a machine, and God become one.
Right. Yeah, and that goes right along with the quote that we were reading, where it's focusing on the good in the task. That he's not focusing on I have a really nice looking ambulance. I'm going to win ambulance of the month, for the Delaware Valley.
Ladies are going to be watching me drive my ambulance.
I can go a lot faster than the speed limit.
Yeah.
But instead, you're loving the good. That there
Right.
is something in I'm going to help people.
Mhm.
There's eternal in that, because that's God coming through.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. Okay, guys, so we want to hear what you have to think about this whole thing. Remember, on the other side of the break, we'll be getting to your questions, so write them in if you haven't already, and we'll be right back. All right, so now comes the part of the show, as it does every week, where we are going to take a look at you guys' questions, comments, and thoughts, just kind of hear your perspectives on the situation, because, the more minds, the merrier, So let's take a look at our first one here. This is from Mark on Facebook. I wish God would just do an interview so we could clear up all the doubt with all the second and third party stuff. Yeah, you get like second, third hand. God says this, God says that. And you know that you got to be suspect of the information when people are both saying God says opposite things, So that kind of brings up for me a little bit of what we talked about last show, which is why doesn't God just tell us? And just bringing up Swedenborg's, he talks sort of at length about how the importance of rationality, and we can't just be told this is what's up, because then you get too rigid, and there's no room for expansion. And the human process of weighing something, is this true, is this, and especially what's right and wrong, you have to experience that for yourself to really believe, like, okay, well, this is good or this is bad. To me, I think that's the value. And although of course it would be nice if we're like, okay, next week we have God on the show, he's going to do the whole thing, I'm going to step out, that would be awesome. But I guess there's a good reason. So do you guys have thoughts on that?
Well, it says the nature of love is to give to another what you enjoy and what you have, so they can enjoy it as if it were their own.
Right.
And what God has to give us is his life. He's life itself. So he gives us his life, and he lets us enjoy it as if it were our own. And part of that, as if it were our own, is the process of learning, making mistakes, having a good time, challenges, overcoming challenges. And if he's just, although I believe he's all-powerful in doing those things, he does it in such a way that we have the experience of living, of learning, of growing, of maturing, and all that. And that's his gift to us. If he just came down and told us every answer, we wouldn't have to struggle. We wouldn't have to learn through experience. It's like being on a unicycle. I ride a unicycle. Balance taught me. Balance is already perfect within me, and I'm paying attention to it. Well, why doesn't balance just come, grab my body, and have it ride a unicycle? Well, everybody be riding a unicycle. I wouldn't have the process of learning. I wouldn't have the delight in saying, hey, I learned how to ride a unicycle, because it would have been done for me rather than appear to have taken place through me.
Yeah.
So not much of an answer, but I think he wants us to enjoy and participate in life for the fun of it. They say for fun and for free, and not just be handing everything. It's just like you want your children to learn. You could hand them everything.
Yeah.
But you want them to learn, so he said, this is mine. I did this.
Yeah. And so that disclaimer, we're not going to have satisfactory answers to the biggest questions in life, but I think hopefully we can be saying things that resonate. And I like there, because I think if we're talking about what's temporal and what's eternal, and so maybe being able to ride a unicycle is temporal, but the experience of learning and that connection to, okay, this is how you do something, this is how processes work, that's the eternal. So Ray, did you have thoughts on this?
Yeah, it's a great question, first of all.
Yeah.
I love the idea, and sort of in a whimsical way, I wanted to say, well, God did try it. He did come for a personal interview once, he got crucified. But on the other hand, I think Revelation is real. And it's sort of written in such a way where it's hard to get at unless you really, really want to know. And when you want to know, it just unfolds, and God's speaking to you. It isn't like he's not revealing himself.
Yeah. And that Swedenborg was, in that, what I was mentioning before in those quotes, is saying that it happens in this place where there's still room for doubt. As in, it happens like you get this kind of quiet, like, this is speaking to me right now. But you're free to write it off. It's like, okay, that wasn't actually anything, or you're free to embrace it. And somehow, all these factors, everything we just talked about, comes together, and there's some good reason, is the thing in the end. That there's some reason why. Because obviously, if there was a better way to do it, it would be done that way. Mm-hmm. So there's our unsatisfactory answers for you, Mark. I appreciate the thought, and let's get to our next. And sorry, can we go back to that one in a second? I was just going to say, Mark, really take a look at last week's episode if you get a minute, because it's just about that. So, all right, sorry to ruin everything. Let's go to our next our question. Drive-by Poet on YouTube. What does Swedenborg say about partial attached love versus universal unconditional love? I would say he says a lot. Pete, do you want to take the first shot at that one?
Probably not, but well, I think they're both there, obviously.
Yeah.
I have conditional love, and I think God has unconditional love for me and is capable of having unconditional love through me. I don't experience a lot of that. Most of my love is conditional, even though I say it isn't conditional.
Yeah. It must be really hard for you. I don't know.
But I know the difference, and I would like to move away from those attached conditional loves into something that isn't looking for anything in return and has no judgment about it. I think Thich Nhat Hanh says you can point to the North Star and it'll give you direction, but don't expect to get there too soon. That's sort of how I feel about unconditional love. I want to go in that direction. I feel I'm going in that direction, but it's a long trip.
Definitely. And I think about, where it shows up in Swedenborg, is that God really all true, like unconditional love is love. I mean, that the other stuff is really, something else, whatever you want to call it, ego, love of self. And so love is coming out of God. And then everything else is coming out of this self, and they're really like they can seem similar. Like you're saying, I feel this every once in a while, but that they're actually opposites when you get back to the sources of them. So and that tapping and accepting that unconditional love, and he often describes God as love for the entire human race. That is accepting that is heaven, as he puts it.
I'd just say one thing. Gurdjieff had said, real love, unconditional love, cannot be turned to its opposite.
Oh yeah.
Whereas ego-based love, I love you, honey, it's so great. Did you want to go to the movie? No, I don't want to go to a movie. Oh, why do you always do that to me?
Yeah.
That can be turned to its opposite. It's not love. That's why Jesus, even though he was on the cross, continued to love. He is love. And that's the kind of love that he wants to give to us through this process called living.
Yeah, Ray, do you have thoughts?
Now, Swedenborg does speak about that love, which is core, unconditional love. But he also has this important qualification that's different than Eastern religion. In Eastern religion, you have this concept of samabuddhi, which is equal love to everyone. There's no differences. In Swedenborg, your primary love is called conjugal love, and that's a love between a husband and a wife, or a love of wanting to unite what's good and true. There's lots of levels to that.
Yeah.
But the most external and really important for society is the love between a husband and wife. That's central. And out of that flows love for children. And then what he calls mutual love, a love for society. And keeping those in order are really crucial. I've just seen in my own life, it's so easy to get those out of balance. I'm more interested in my job and my teaching and not caring about my children or my wife. And I have to get that back into balance. And that trinity of loves is so essential. And so that's a kind of order that Swedenborg brings that I don't see that taught directly or in that way in other faiths.
Swedenborg, there's a lot of complexity. He uses the word love all over the place, and he uses it in ways other people don't always use it. And his structure of love is complex, like biology is complex. There's these orders and degrees, and and it is essentially comes down to there are areas where you can do the most good, and where you're most plugged in, and then and also conditional love, as in if I have somebody that I know who is ruining their life through drug habit or something, and they're like, can I borrow money because I want to buy drugs? That maybe the most loving thing for me to do is get tough with them in some way. And that's just an easy example, but there's all kinds of there are ways to show that unconditional love with external conditions. So I just would say that there are a lot of nuances to the way he looks at that, but essentially, we've covered some of the big points of it here.
I just want to say in the question, he used that interesting phrase, a partial attachment.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a very interesting phrase because, we're going to be attached to a certain extent to our immediate family in a way that we're not going to be attached to the entire world. But love, which is God's love, is always pure love. And so that question of attachment, I think, is a really big one. And we have to look at that and decide what does that mean for each of us.
Yeah, and everything you guys are saying brings up more things because he says so much about it, but that he'll describe all affection as love. You know, you can have a love for evil, you can have a love for good. That love is a driving force. So, you know, it's just about, but at the same time, actual love is this unconditional from God, and that, you know, you can have like a good love for your family or a bad love for your, meaning like if I only care about my immediate family and would rather, you know, if there's a, you know, fender bender and it's, you know, my cousin versus someone else, I try to lie, and I saw it, I lie to protect my cousin, you know, even if he caused it, you know, that's actually just like loving yourself. You got to love the whole, and you know, love fairness more than even those that are close to you, because really it's not good for your cousin to let him get away with something. He's got to. So a million things to be said about that. Proves that it was a great question. Thank you so much. Let's get to another one. This is from Theodora on Facebook. This is very helpful and great, thank you. But I wonder why we're so focused on ourselves and our lives. But what about the children? All the children around the world who have no choices. So we're thinking about, I'm assuming that we're talking here about, you know, poverty, situations where we're talking here about these conditions that need to exist in order for us to make free choice. And, you know, okay, what can I learn from, there's a hole in my roof, what can I learn from this? You know, very different situation. There's a kid who's born, I saw this thing about orphanages in, I think, Romania, and the kids just had no like human contact and all that. So it's a very different, that doesn't look like, oh, these kids are learning something from them. I mean, they're too young. So that seems like a different phenomenon to me. You know, like this is the fallout from us adults who are on the planet not taking care of things, you know, in the way that they could. And I don't see that as like God is teaching those little kids a lesson or something, because, you know, he's got to be there and doing something and bringing, you know, obviously thinking about their spirits and how can they still be set up to learn and grow. But it seems like there's something different. I don't know. Do you guys have thoughts about it?
Well, I just say the most important and most internal in everyone is what they call immutable. It can't be injured. It can't be affected. It's always protected by God, whether it's a child in poverty or a child in wealth.
Like a deep part of
there's a very, very deepest part of you. And I think in terms of the verb seeing, I can be seeing a rat that's been run over on the highway, or I can be seeing a beautiful sunset. Seeing isn't polluted by seeing a rat on the road.
Right.
And seeing isn't increased or beautified by seeing a beautiful sunset. Seeing itself is immutable and protected. So I think there's something inside of every human that's living and loving, and that seems to be the most important. And that's where everyone's protected, no matter what the external appearance might be. I choose to believe that because that can make some sense. And there was a period in my life where I grew up where the externals weren't so good. But there was a sense that my experiencing was getting value out of even the most difficult parts of that growing up. I didn't like the content, but the experiencing was still beneficial to me, and I call on that now as a counselor in later years. So I don't know if that's of any help, but that's a thought that came to mind.
Yeah, well, certainly people who have been through all kinds of horrible things will reflect back and say, this helps me be who I am today. Yeah, Ray, did you have thoughts?
Well, it's a wonderful question, and all I can say is people are called in different ways. When the ego is cleared out, they really get a sense of what they want to do with their lives and how they want to serve their neighbor. And some will serve directly in areas of helping children around the world. Others will do what we're doing here. Others will drive ambulances or search for a cure for cancer. There's lots of different ways that people are called, but the important thing is to remove the ego so that you're really pure about that call and you're responding to something that God wants you to do.
Yeah, sometimes I think about it as, you know, your preparedness. Like, you know, I'm making sure, okay, I'm trying to work on my issues, do what I think I'm in a position to do, but always be sort of ready. Like, you could get the call any minute, like something could fall into your lap. Like, okay, now, because I've known people that go over and help a bunch of orphans, you know, in Kenya, and so maybe, you know, and those people were ready, you know, and so you never know. Yeah, and the plight of people around the world is all based on how the whole world, the dysfunction of the whole world. So who knows where your specific role is to try to chip away at that and create a more just society. But yeah, it's a good point that you can do what you're suited to do. So great question. Thank you very much. Let's get to one more here before we wrap it up. Thieges on YouTube. I'd like to know your thoughts on what the key would be for the experience of complete peace in life. Yeah, well, we're gonna tell you that, except you got to buy the DVD, which is $79. Complete peace in life. I think it goes back for me. Well, this is like somebody saying, like, if I was playing basketball and I made 50% of my free throws, somebody saying, what do you think is the way to make 100% of your free throws? It's something I haven't accomplished, so why would you come to me about it? But I haven't been able to manufacture peace in my life, but I would say there are times when I've been able to let it in, or it's come to me. And I think that it really goes back to what I was saying about the house on the rock or the sand. It's about what your goals are in life. Because we're all sort of subconsciously or consciously building, trying to build environments in which we'll be happy. Sometimes that's tangible, like, okay, I'm staking a lot in my career and how that career does, or in my relationships and how they do, or something, or my finances and how they do, and that's my goal. And those goals are always going to be subject to the weather of life. I can lose my job and suddenly it's all gone. But if you're looking if the goal is a certain kind of mindset of, okay, I want to try to continue to improve internally, spiritually, meaning I want to be how can this be an opportunity for me to let the divine in and learn to love in this, and how can I continue to be nicer and nicer to people throughout it, and that's the goal. I feel like because there's it's a goal that's so long term, even if you have setbacks, there's something there. Swedenborg describes it as the stream of providence, and that really you get to complete peace once you completely understand and trust that God is in charge of everything. I actually have up on the wall over there, it's like the only Swedenborg quote I have like written on the wall, is this whole thing about people who are in what he calls the stream of providence, and that they aren't setting their heart on specific goals. They know God is doing things. They're working and living and participating in life, but they are tapped in and dependent on God, and that's where you can get some peace. So those are my thoughts on peace, and I'd love to hear yours.
Well, I think the simple way I hold it for myself is there's a reference to the self, which is the divine within you, capital S. Mm-hmm. That's the divine within you that's living itself. And then there's the me, which is, in my case, named Peter. It's a mind-body organism, and here it is. That's the me. What I read and what I believe and what I start to experience is real peace comes from there being only the self and no me. Then the divine is flowing through me, and all concerns for self, all fears, all anxiety about the future or embarrassment about the past disappears with the disappearance of me. And then there's just the divine flowing through this instrument he created. I still experience that life as if it's mine, but it has no fear or concern about itself because itself has become zero.
Yeah, it makes me think of, I just watched this documentary, it was called Chasing Ice. Mm. It's this guy who went and like to all these really, really freezing cold places and set up these cameras to watch glaciers and take pictures of them, every day, and see, are they receding, what are they doing? And there was so much that went into it. The cameras broke, and you have to wade through this freezing water, and his knee had to get surgery on, all this stuff. Part of the heavenly peace that Swedenborg describes is you care about a cause more than you care about yourself. You care about helping. Mm-hmm. And I think he was going through plenty of unrest, and they showed up, they'd done all this work, spent all this money to get this camera set up. They came back after the winter and found out it was broken, didn't take any pictures. Mm-hmm. And he had obvious anguish, but it's a different kind of anguish that I find when I'm in my little ways excited about a cause. And even through its ups and downs, it's different than when the ups and downs are about yourself. It's just a different feeling. It's more palatable. And I think there's something of peace even in the failures there. So, Ray, closing thoughts on peace. Briefly describe how we can all have peace.
Well, the passage that you referred to from Divine Providence, it begins with the words, unruffled is their spirit, whether they obtain the objects of their desire or not. And that idea of having an unruffled spirit or another translation is their spirit remains in equanimity. They're just even. America was founded on this idea of the pursuit of happiness, which is the first falsity. That the truth is that we are designed, wired, created happy. That's our native state. And we don't need anything to make us happy or to pursue it. We just, when we let go of ego concerns, remain unruffled, like Pete says, God's flowing through. That is sheer happiness.
Yeah, and that there's this balance of unruffled is their spirit whether or not they obtain the objects of their desire. Like there's a goal, it's not like, okay, I just woke up today and I don't care about anything, but it's like there's something, I know what's good. Like I'm a ambulance driver and I know I want to help people, but in that's what I'm trying to do very specifically. But if I don't get exactly this or exactly that, I'm not crushed because the goal remains.
That's right.
Yeah.
And the goal is the heavenly treasure.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a great question and it's a great note to end on. So if you guys are watching this after it's been taped, go ahead and write your questions anyway, and we'll try to get to them over the course of the week. We're going to take a really quick break and come back for our correspondences meditation. All right, so now we're going to go. We've done a lot of talking, used a lot of words, cognitive side of things. We're going to try to go a little more experiential here. This is something we do every week. It's called correspondences, which comes out of this idea, as I explain to you guys every week, that the Swedenborg said that actually external objects, physical objects, are images or representations of internal realities, of psychological or spiritual traits or components, that kind of thing. And that by looking at these objects, we can actually get sort of a better sense of what the internal world is like. So today we're going to look at gems or precious stones or something. So in Swedenborg, you find this great duality of truth and good, or love and wisdom, and that a lot of things have reference to one of these two sort of primal forces, and that rocks or stones have to do with truth, but that precious stones, are these, especially exquisite, kind of really fundamental or somehow elevated truths. And you can see, on the physical level, the hubbub around precious stones. So here so the reason that that's there is that on a spiritual level, this is an image or an embodiment of something really powerful and good. And so I don't know exactly what they all are. Swedenborg has more specifics, but what I want you to do is just have in your mind, okay, what we're seeing is actual images of these really valuable concepts. And then just take a look at this, 45 seconds or so, and just see what comes to you. So for me, I was just saying, there's got to be something awesome. Like not even like thinking of some specific idea, but just look at the power in that, and just the nature of those forms. So there are similarly wonderful things to be unearthed in our minds if we so dig for them. So thank you guys all for watching. If you'd like to help support the program, you could make a small donation. Open up the link with the description at the bottom of this video, and there's a little place where you can click and make a PayPal donation, tax deductible, to the nonprofit Swedenborg Foundation. Ray and Peter, thank you so much for being on. Always great having you guys here. I liked the conversation, and I would love to have you back sometime.
Thank you very much.
All right, everyone else, we'll see you next week, same time.